Good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session for Wednesday, August 6, 2025. It's 10:04 a.m. My name is Ty Mentor, Chair of the Board. To my left, Vice Chair Commissioner Wayne Fournier, Commissioner Carolina Mejia, Commissioner Rachel Grant, and Commissioner Emily Klaus participating virtually. We have County Manager Leonard Hernandez and Assistant County Managers Jennifer Walker and Josh Cummings. Public virtual attendance available on the Thurston County YouTube channel. Written public comment may be received up to 2 hours in advance of the meeting and distributed to the board. Action may be taken at the meeting. We have several topics to try to cover between now and noon. First up is a Conservation Futures Fund overview.
Yeah, Chair, would you mind if I bring up the same conversation we had just before this meeting? Because it's relevant, since last night we received a presentation from Intercity Transit on the roundabout. I appreciate staff's coordination on that. This process will continue to move forward to eventually enact an ILA between Intercity Transit and the county. If commissioners have any questions or need any additional information, it'd be good for us to receive that before that process continues to move forward. What I don't want to do is blindside Intercity Transit if we're not supportive of this. And I heard your comment, Commissioner Fournier, about making sure the residents that are attending the meetings are kept up to date. And so any type of item that comes forward, we will notice them through the clerk. But wanted to see if there's opportunity for any comments or perspectives.
I just appreciate the county manager flagging this, because this can be one of those things where, like, a few months down the road, it's like too late, a fait accompli, when really this is the time for us to kind of say, hold on, is this, are we good? Because we don't want to get to that point where it feels like our hands are tied because too many things are locked in and too many, trains move too far down the tracks.
I want to be respectful of our staff's time and their staff's time, that if there's any additional research, now would be a good time to do that versus waiting for them to be under the impression that we're moving forward and bringing it for signature, and then lots of questions come out, which could hurt timelines, etc. And I just happened to have Karen here, who could speak to any of the process.
I don't know that, I'm game for signing on to anything. I just don't know. I hear, is that a good representation of that neighborhood? Is that, one or two people that are upset? I don't know that it's the right thing.
So then my question would be, can we provide another work session where we can go into a little bit more depth to help you understand this and prevent staff from marching this down any further and getting our legal teams involved in an ILA? That is a significant amount of work. I would recommend that in a board work session. We purposely asked IT to come to a board meeting so that folks can give public comment, because we know how interested they've been in the past.
I understand IT wants this, and I understand there's a neighborhood or a community that maybe doesn't want this, and that's the end of the conversation. Which one do you more data and them saying roundabouts are great and these people saying roundabouts are horrible. I don't know that gets
that doesn't really help me, but what I would help me is to have like just a little bit bigger picture view. I don't totally understand where IT is going now, and then somebody came up and said, well, there's another roundabout at Meridian, why aren't they using that? But just to see what is the problem from the beginning that's trying to be solved, and how, and somebody made a good point saying is IT's, they're spending more money, but this is $4.8 million project. So are they really over what period of time are we as a community saving money by having this versus the status quo? I don't have the greatest sense. I know the intersection that we're talking about, putting that, and I know what that looks like, but this is not about just that. It's about a bigger swath of where the bus routes go. They're trying to reestablish a former bus route that has been shut down for a while because they can't afford to send the bus to the place where it would need to turn around. How many people ride that? There's a lot. To me, there's a lot more. I don't know where I stand on this question.
I couldn't tell where the neighborhoods were either, like.
Yeah, like how close are they? And they kept saying this is an interceptor road that's like, so the one they're worried about, they'll never be able to get out is like apparently like grabbing like a whole bunch of other roads. Isn't that what an interceptor road? I'm looking at Jennifer. But I mean, to me, it was an incomplete presentation for me to say this is right or wrong.
Okay.
That's where I'm at. But I don't know, Commissioner Mejia, you sit on IT, maybe you have seen more data on this, or?
We have, and, you know, this conversation came up last year, when, you know, we approved to do the study, and, there is, an FAQ, that, basically IT has set up. And I'm happy to share that, and it has kind of a lot of the purpose, the current service, the project benefit, the phases and all of that. So that way, hopefully that kind of helps answer some of these questions. I also want to say that IT has done a lot of outreach when it comes to these communities. They've gone to HOA meetings. They've basically they were responding comment by comment is what Peter was doing. And so there has been a lot of outreach done to these community members that kind of showed up, that have been showing up to these meetings, which they're kind of the same folks that were last year. I think I saw one new face, you know, who talked and clarified kind of some of the data that was being presented and expanded on it. But other than that, it's been kind of the same group. So the page is intercitytransit.com. And I will share this so you don't have to write it down. It's more for the public. /construction/East Martin Wake Gateway Station Roundabout. So IT really and in terms of how many riders and how much use is in that bus line, it's a pretty active and busy bus line.
Am I correct in saying that this is an understanding that this is going to help them reestablish a line that's not currently in service?
Yeah, and
52, there's
yeah. And it does provide a range of future services options for Northeast Lacey as well.
Yeah, and the presentation yesterday wasn't our presentation, it was Intercity Transit's presentation
CJ Alliances.
to you, so if there's more information you would need.
I'm curious if the HOAs have like an official position, or if these are just folks that are members of the HOA that have their own individual positions. Did they meet as a body, you know, and take a vote and say, none of us want this, or are like, is the 90% of the other HOA members in favor of it?
I'd have to ask Intercity Transit to get that information, but
I'm not scared of it. I like roundabouts. Like, I think they're great most of the time, but like, I don't know what that community actually wants.
Okay. So, any other comments? We will round up some information. I think what I would recommend is we come back to a work session, talk about this a little bit more, and then get direction to continue to proceed with the ILA, so that you all are aware that that's in motion, because that'll come as an AIS. I don't want you to be blindsided by that.
Appreciate that.
Because this isn't our project right now. When we sign the ILA, we get closer to, it's still not our project per se, but it is our road. And it'll start taking on the appearance that the county's in this and moving it forward. Okay, thank you so much, Jeff.
Okay, so back to Conservation Futures. County Manager, were you going to have some time?
Ashley, thanks so much for being here and allowing us a little bit of time to chat that through. Why don't you come up?
Good morning, Commissioners. Happy to be here. I'll be here for the first two presentations, so thank you for having me. Ashley Rye, Community Planning and Economic Development Director, and I I'm joined here today by two other people, very esteemed in the county.
Good morning, Karen Weiss, Public Works Director. Summer Miller, Budget and Finance Manager in the Commissioner's Office.
The reason we're covering this is because Conservation Futures Fund is always something that there's questions about during budget time, and so we thought it would be advantageous for us to have this conversation, provide some background for folks that may be new to the fund or haven't had a lot of background on this, and so I think the three different departments and for working on this, so we're going to walk through.
So I wanted to add, thank you for that, County Manager. I wanted to also add, this is going to look a little different to some of the commissioners that have learned about conservation futures in the past. These three departments are taking a collaborative approach to make sure that the board has a holistic view. In the past, it's been a bit siloed and as kind of a just in time, here's a project, here's the money. That's the way it's been treated in the past. But I appreciate the leadership of the CPAD Director, the Public Works Director, and the Budget Manager to have this coordinated approach for the county commissioners. So knowing that this is new, if there's questions or input that the board would like to provide, we're open to receive that in how we're doing this. So thank you for that. Ashley.
Okay. So first, we're just going to start with a general program overview. You may have heard a little bit more about this in the budget presentations you've been having, or if you've been on the board long enough to see the different cycles of conservation futures through our annual grant award program. But at a high level, conservation futures is a land conservation funding mechanism. It is authorized by the state. We were one of the first counties in the state back in 1989 to actually establish a conservation futures program. So we were definitely a leader in this realm. Under state law, it can be used to protect open space, forest lands, habitat areas, farm and recreation land. Conservation futures, as you'll learn in this, has historically been used to really support our parks, open space, and trails program here in the county, especially in the early days. The way that we fund our conservation futures program is through a tax levy. And that tax levy can be used to fund land acquisition or conservation easements. It can also be used in a limited capacity for operations and maintenance on parks, open space, and trails that were purchased, at least in part, with Conservation Futures Fund. So we'll cover that in a little bit more detail. The current rate is 0.028 cents for every $1,000 of assessed value. And the max allowed under state law is actually 0.0625. So there are other counties, I think Pierce and King are the ones that come to mind quickest, that are assessing the highest value that can be assessed. It's important to note, though, that you can only increase the tax levy through a public vote. So it's not a councilmanic decision to raise that. So we started in 1989. What does conservation futures look like here? This was a very informative timeline for me to put together, since major components of implementing conservation futures fall within CPED. But I think the important takeaway is that there are different ways in which conservation futures funding can be used. And as a board, you can make policy decisions that guide what that looks like here in the county. So pre-2010, program funds were largely aimed at acquiring the regional trail network that we all enjoy today. And I know that there was just an expansion that was celebrated here a few weeks ago. Park acquisitions and open space. The open space that Conservation Futures was, like on a map, the biggest area that it was used for pre-2010 was the Nisqually Valley. So a large part, the lower Nisqually Valley, has been protected through conservation easements using Conservation Futures Fund. In 2010, the board made a policy decision to memorialize a shift to focus on community-driven projects, and that's really when the annual grant award program was started. That's not to say that there weren't grant awards given prior to 2010, but this is when we really started putting together the administrative framework and CPED to run it as this annual program. So at that time, the annual allocation for the grant program was about $1 million, a little higher, a little lower, depending on what the projects were that came in. In 2017, there was a pause to the annual grant program. That's when we started evaluating conservation futures under the broader umbrella of the Habitat Conservation Program and trying to understand how Conservation Futures could be used to help support the needs under that. The board then resumed, once the HCP was underway and we knew that we had a pathway to establishing the mitigation fees we now collect, the board resumed the annual grant program. At that time, new criteria was specifically added for salmon recovery. We do use criteria, like a public benefit rating system for those annual grants. And salmon recovery was added to that. New things can be added as our conservation needs evolve here in the county. But also at that time, and you may have heard of this from our conservation partners, there was a split. So of the million, $500,000 was still put into that annual grant program. The other $500,000 was really held back for prairie conservation efforts under the HCP or beyond the HCP if needed for protection of prairies. So for the last 5 years, CPED has been managing that annual grant award program. We come to the board, usually around the August, September timeframe with grant awards for you to consider. And then we go ahead and implement those grants through our conservation partners.
Just to add, that bullet about salmon recovery, that was my request because the law says that salmon recovery is encouraged to be prioritized as one of the criteria, and we didn't have it in our criteria, so I was just trying to square up.
That's accurate, and other criteria that, other jurisdictions have, they've got things like climate mitigation or resilience, now that is a larger factor. Prairies are unique to us, and prairies haven't necessarily been baked into the public benefit rating system either.
But we completely shifted from regional trail networks, park acquisition, open spaces to community-driven projects and prairie conservation?
Not a complete shift, but 2010 was really, at least what we were able to find, reading through the past resolutions and changes, that there seemed to be sort of this larger shift from using conservation futures primarily for open space, regional trails, things like that, to kind of.
Is there any longer an element of that kind of historic use?
I'd say, let me back up a
Yeah.
little bit. I think that the big change was in the programmatic, that instead of just different ideas coming forth, in 2010, the board made it more programmatic with the community-driven projects. So people could still apply for projects similar to what was done in the past, but it was done through a more program-driven with the ranking process.
Yep, we have a ranking, we have a whole committee, essentially the administrative framework to inform the awards was established in 2010.
Was that like maybe partly, I'm just guessing, but like maybe the rise of the land trust organizations who are doing a lot of legwork out and, like finding properties and creating good projects? I don't know when all those land trusts started to become prominent.
They got intertwined.
Yeah, I would imagine that might have been a factor.
And a lot of other counties do have both a grant award program as well as holding back conservation futures funds for, board-driven projects to align with, comprehensive plan vision and things like that.
So are there still any elements in our system that are that?
Like, do we fund trails or parks or open space? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we currently are using 25%, which is the maximum amount allowed, to fund maintenance and operations on specific parks and all of our trails, because they were at one point purchased in part, as Ashley mentioned earlier, with conservation futures. So we are currently maximizing the available amount to fund our maintenance and operations as a piece of our maintenance and operations costs for parks and
What
trails.
about for additional acquisition?
Budget.
For new acquisitions, we also budget some conservation futures funding for new acquisitions so that we could also then maximize this funding for any future expansion.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was your?
That was my question. Is there any used as well for future acquisition?
Yes,
I
yes.
think the operational dynamic with future acquisition is their team in, the parks team, monitoring and maintaining what they have today is stretched to its max. So if we are going to ask for more acquisition, then we have to grow the parks team so that they can have the resources to actually maintain, unless there's a partnership that doesn't require our staff to maintain it.
And again, I want to focus I want to go back and say, we are currently maximizing the amount that we can use for maintenance and operations within very few $1,000s. So even if we purchased more parks and trails or used, added to our asset base, we are still maxed out at that 25% of annual receipts. So there's limited capacity to grow the use of these funds unless we were to raise the amount that we were, for maintenance and operations, unless we were to raise the, amount that we were collecting.
And ideally, if we weren't in the budget situation we were in, Public Works would be advancing is it trails map?
Two buildings and grounds maintenance FTEs.
Oh,
The
no,
post plan.
Oh, the post plan.
right.
And, no. But yes, we would.
That was a $100,000 request last cycle that, unfortunately, the board doesn't, we just didn't have the resources to support. But that is something that is definitely a tool to look at where do we go from here with our parks program.
The post-plan can't be supported through these.
You cannot. Summer.
No, we went through that, yes.
This is an option. You can't use real estate excise tax funding to support the development of that plan either. We looked at the available options.
We gotta follow the state rules.
Of course. So real quick, I understand what you're saying about the 25% and the maxing out, but you also said that there's times where maybe as the fund grows, a little bit or whatever, that where you can acquire something there's a need to acquire something to sort of keep that 25%,
So
I guess
current,
my question would be, how would that process look? Because
so currently, basically, we calculate what 25% of the receipts are, and that is what is available to pay for maintenance and operations on specific parks. Kennydale and Deschutes Falls Parks are the only two parks that we can use Conservation Futures funding for maintenance and operations, but all three of our trails can. We are limited, these are lots of details, but we are limited in the amount that we can use for our trails because at the time we started using Conservation Futures M&O funding, which was, I think back, I didn't check, but in the 2019, 2018 time period, we were limited, couldn't use, had a certain amount we could use because we couldn't supplant. You can't use Conservation Futures funding to supplant other funding resources. So we are able to adjust that amount. I believe I can't quite remember what it is off the top of my head. Let's just say a couple $100,000 for trails each year that we are able to escalate based on a CPI. But that's the amount we use for trails. And then the remaining amount that's available from that 25% is available for parks, those two parks. That's what we don't currently always max out, but we're very close to. Not sure if that quite answered your question, but I mean, the pot of money is, what are the receipts? What's 25% of that? What are the costs that are eligible?
I think to expand the pot of money takes a public vote.
what I was really asking was, you said that Wayne asked, is there ever any money for a community project or a commissioner priority or project, like you were saying, and you said maybe sometimes here and there.
Well, I think what I would say is the 25% M&O pot, that leaves 75% remaining of the funds, and that's sort of the discussion about what's available, what are those options available with that other 75% of the funds. Is that a fair way of saying it?
It's split 50-50 between prairie conservation and community grants. But then you said
Of the
there's a little bit
75%.
that is squirreled away.
We'll be,
Future acquisition.
we can get into the numbers, please,
later.
if you don't, I mean,
I think what I would say is that it's 25,000 or 10,000 or whatever, it's a placeholder that we budget with conservation futures to take advantage of should something change. Should something change and it's not 25% and it's larger, or the pool gets larger, what collected gets larger, it creates options and opportunities that it allows us to take advantage of opportunities that may come up. Because if you spend just $1 on the acquisition, then you can use conservation futures for M&O. Currently, we're maxed out for M&O, but who knows what could happen in the future.
So my question was, when that opportunity that you just described might come up, how would the board see that? you'd come to us and say, hey, it would just be like case by case basis?
And it's in our budget. We have a Parks Acquisition and Development Program in our capital improvement program. And so that puts us in a good position, gives us that flexibility. So if something comes up, we would be able to take action to move something forward, right?
The
And we
action is
have-
done by the board.
And the
because
action's
board
done
has
by the
authority.
board, and we program in $10,000 as that placeholder amount, should something come available.
So you
And then
come
that way
to
that
us and say, you know, we're gonna squeeze a little bit of conservation futures to, you know.
If they take $1 out.
I'm not
put
sure
it
that's
in
ever
the
happened since I've been on the board, but I
Correct.
understand. Okay.
Yes,
Because we
because
have
we've
not-
only been maintaining what
Right,
we
we
have.
haven't been in the position to acquire more
Yeah.
because of the resourcing issue.
Yeah.
Which goes back to the value of that post-plan so that they and the board are aware of what we're tracking and what our opportunities for the future. Because the pressure that's on them right now is the lack of additional resources for them to add in staff. All right, carry on.
So this is a spatial representation of what Thurston County's been able to achieve through our Conservation Futures program. Given the fact that we have not had an increase to the tax levy, I think this is a pretty impressive map for how Conservation Futures has been leveraged both by the county and our conservation partners to conserve 5,800 acres countywide. This is actually the first time we've put it on a map. I was really excited to see the geographic distribution of it. Also the blend of open space, farm, trails, and parks that are represented on this map. What you'll see is that the green is really what, basically anything that's prairie conservation. And you'll see a lot of growth on the prairie conservation over the coming years. But yeah, and this map just keeps growing. So the grant awards that we're gonna be bringing to you here in the next month or so will be additional green on the map.
This is a great map representation that we haven't been able to build in CPED previously, so really well done. I think the red is gonna grow significantly in the habitat conservation plan area. So continuing to conserve areas, that's protecting the environment that the HCP requires us to do, so.
Yeah, so our current HCP calls for about 4,000 acres of conservation of prairie in the next 30 years. And so, almost a double of what you see here.
Do you have all these memorized, what they are?
I know a lot of them, yes.
Can you tell me where it says District 3 and then there's like a Tetris piece right above it?
Tetris piece.
The tetra,
It is a Tetris piece.
that one,
What is that?
I'm not familiar with that one, actually.
That's like in Capital State Forest, it looks like.
Yeah, it does.
Adjacent to, I think that might be a capital land trust project. I mean, I could
Okay,
definitely find
I'll
out.
be curious on that
but,
one.
We can follow up on that one.
That's a
And you'll
Tetris
see-
piece.
And you'll see the green, it is harder to see the trails, but look at all the trails that we have here in the county because of our Conservation Futures program and the amazing work in Public Works, keeping them maintained. So this is a board managed fund. There is about 9 million currently available in the fund. I should say, this is not a budget presentation, so all of these numbers are approximations. That's what happens when you have the CPED director put together tables. So, approximate. We collect about 1.7 million with our current levy rate. I did throw up there, I can't help myself because I'm always focused on the future, what the possible collection would be. If we collected 6.25 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, it's almost a tripling. So instead of 1.7 million, it'd be around 4.2 million that we bring in. So we do have some set aside in reserves. We collect 1.7 million annually, and we'll get into how that's broken up. Of that annual allocation, we are now only being able to put about $100,000 in reserves. So the pot that has grown, it is to have it be that large, I mean, it would take years. So I say that just because you want to be very thoughtful about how those monies get spent. At this point, we've got $5 million that were set aside for HCP reserves, and we are busily working on that. And then we still have 2.3 million left for programming.
The 5 million HCP reserve, that's like from when there was pause in 2017 and 18. That's where
Pause
that
and then
got built up.
probably historic reserves that were also available. This is just a drill down, and it is an approximation, but a drill down by percentage of how the current $1.7 million is being allocated. And please, Summer, feel free to jump in if I misrepresent this at all. But, so you see there's about this $1 million allocation into the community grant program as well as into prairie conservation. We also have this annual funding that we talked about for Public Works, Parks and Trails maintenance, so that's about $450,000. And then we've got that placeholder in our capital improvement program for parks for $10,000. At least right now, we've got about $250,000 set aside for debt service and project closing costs, because a lot of the awards that we give, the timeline might be 1 year, might be 2 years. We have to grant extensions, so we always want to make sure that we have enough in that fund that we can close out those projects, even if they carry over into future years. Anything else you want to add, Summer, on sort of the
Numbers are
annuals?
fairly close. I mean, the M&O amount is a little bit inflated, but I think that overall, all figures are correct.
Okay, thank you.
What determines that pie chart? Like, how is that pie chart decided, on what goes where?
The breakout of the funding, Commissioner?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think that's a policy decision.
Yeah, that's just a graph of what we said, that about a third goes to the M&O and a third goes, 500,000 goes to the HCP, keep fees down, and then 500,000 goes to community grants, and that just shows that third. I mean, we decided it, and it could be changed, but
That's part of why we're having this conversation, because normally when budget comes up and we see figures, we're having this conversation without all the details. And so our thought is, let's have this conversation now, so as you head in, you understand this fund, but then if there's any direction or decisions that the board wants to make, we can take those and then come back and explain how that's gonna change our current approach.
So we have 5 million set aside in reserves for HCP.
The board made a decision, I believe it was in the midterm, to allocate $5 million for CPED for this year. So any of that amount that's unspent, we will roll that forward in a change request into 2026 so that they still have the budget authority moving forward.
And that was anticipating a large land acquisition to allow for permits to keep going through. So we have to have the land acquired.
Yeah.
So when people come to buy a permit, that we have the land that can offset that permit.
Yeah.
And just for context, I looked at the latest appraisals, 100 acres, based on the appraisals we're getting in rural areas, will cost the county $1.5 to $2 million. And so that 5 million really only gets us potentially 200 to 400 acres, which is why it's so important, because we are issuing permits and we've got service areas where we still don't have land secured.
Yes, I guess, like, what does that number need to be in reserves? Is it 5 million? Is it 2 million? Is it 20 million?
Well, I think
Do we continue, if this is the pie chart that adds more money to that, or?
So right now, from the first pie chart, the more detailed one, the annual allocations, 500,000 essentially is shifting into the larger pie chart.
And to give a context, this past year, CPED and the city of Tumwater and the port have been in conversations about very desirable land that would afford everyone, but that was gonna be a pretty expensive endeavor. So to answer your question about what does that number need to be, I think the balance that we have today is based on former board's direction to try to keep us with enough money to make some big purchases. If we were to come back and say, hey, we found 200 acres, we could deplete much of that 5 million, and so we may come back with a recommendation that we put more money aside, because that is the lifeline for continued growth in the county.
Yeah, and the alternative is an increase of the mitigation fees.
Which would make it almost impossible for people to build.
So that money buys down the permit fee. And it's an art, so we don't know what land might come on the market or what we might find in that year, but we think that what we have currently is a good balance.
What do we spend to that $500,000 every year?
If you notice,
We already have this year.
Ashley has brought forward, I think, at least 3
Acquisitions.
quick acquisitions as they find them on the market and are able to, because it has to meet so many specific criteria as to what mitigation land. So they run forward and you look at the picture and you think, well, that doesn't look like much, but it's like, no, but this is this specific.
Yum, Pocket
Yeah,
Corporate North.
Yes, yes.
You're really excited.
Like, all right, cue it up for the board action. Let's get this going.
Yeah, and we have.
Knowing that they have that funding is what allows them to do that and then plan.
Fast.
Because even in our conversations that we were talking about with the 2 other municipalities, the fact that we have this funding, other municipalities don't necessarily have that funding. And it puts the county in a much different place to say, well, we want to negotiate because we.
Like, are we building up that fund, spending down that fund, or trying to maintain that fund? What?
Well, we would have spent that fund significantly down had that deal gone through like we thought it was going to. But that's a
That
free.
comes around once every 7 years or something, and then.
So
That
they're
big
all
thing,
coming,
right?
what we're finding is that, we've got 3 of those conversations going right now. And for each one of our service areas, there's only 1 or 2 really large land holding of a prairie left. And when that comes online, you gotta be ready, because once you lose that opportunity, you're right, it's a once in a generation opportunity. It's not really every 7 years. For the larger ones, it's once in a generation.
We think we will run out of money faster than we'll run out of opportunities.
Yeah.
But it is a board policy decision. That 5 million is a ceiling. But if the board wants to do more, if there is a flexible opportunity or less, thank you. It's a board decision.
We're just trying to help the board understand how that mechanism is tied to cost of permits, ability for folks to move forward, inventory on hand, and then the flexibility for us to do this quickly because we know we have cash on hand, and which is very appealing to folks who are selling. It's often why Ashley's able to be first at the table.
So this is the pie chart that really focuses in on the reserves. So just wanted to highlight that 2/3 of it has been, at least for this year, allocated to HCP. And we will be putting in a change request to carry that forward, because we've got appraisals underway, feasibility studies underway, and they might not come to fruition by the end of this year, just given the timelines for getting through all of that.
So let's answer Commissioner Fournier's question
Yeah.
again. I think, so the question is, we have a good pot of money, but we're not replenishing it very quickly. That's the only $100,000 a year. So that's a little bit of the concern, is that if we do acquire a bunch of properties, we spend all that down, we're not rebuilding it very quickly. So that's why Ashley brings up the potential max at 6 cents, where we're currently at like 3 cents. So I think that was a nut of your question. Before we move on to the projects, I want to make sure that that's clear to the board, that we built up a good reserve, we've been judicious, while also purchasing what we need for permits and conservation. But if we have a couple of quick acquisitions, we're gonna draw that down really fast, and we're not replenishing it very quickly at this current rate. Fair?
Yep. Replenish was the word I was looking for. Thank you.
So what's what is the difference between it says 100,000 placed in reserve each year, but the 500,000 that we're allocating for HCP, isn't that going?
That's spent.
Well, the 500 would be placed if we're not using it. I would say that, given just what we see come on the market, we'll be using that. I mean, a 5-acre chunk.
Well, so when you're saying 100, you're just saying, well, that's what may not be spent out of the 500 every year.
Out of the 1.7 million, out of the 1.7 million you're collecting.
Yeah, but 500,000, the board is dedicated for HCP acquisition.
Yes, I'm not sure if it's gonna replenish the reserves. It'll probably be used
So,
And then
with just
some.
small, with just small
so
acquisitions.
she's programming that she's gonna use 500,000 a year on buying property.
Oh, without, okay, and then in addition to that, there's 100,000 being
Dip into that
squeezed
5
over.
million.
Yeah, that's the.
But if it didn't get spent, that would also add to
Right.
the reserve.
That's the replenishment amount that Josh is talking about. At 100,000, based on what we're tracking with available land, we're gonna be drawing down that 5 million, 100,000 goes in. If we draw it down real fast, which that would be advantageous for us because it would mean there's property that we're buying, it's gonna take multiple years for us to build that back up, for us to have what we have today.
So that's really kind of a timing question, because it's the 500,000 every year, plus the permit fees we're charging are supposed to be, I mean, I know the market, price is probably going up, but that was supposed to be like the maintenance level, but then the reserve is just to be able to grab things,
Yeah, and we are finding that, the HCP, it was a great document. It was also based on 2020 numbers. It is a lot more expensive, the cost per acre.
Okay.
So, CPED forward thinking. Just want to highlight that we do have a lot in the works. As I mentioned, we've got feasibility studies underway, appraisals underway, partnership conversations underway for the HCP. And really, at this point, focus on relationship building. When you think about those larger acquisitions, these are kitchen table conversations. They should be had over the course of years, not months, when you're looking at, trying to establish really strong foundations for partnerships with our landowners. So appreciate the board looking long-term on this, because it really does allow us to do it right rather than do it fast. We also, about a year ago, received a grant, one of the Habitat Strategic Initiative League grants, to help us basically look at our conservation programs, not just conservation futures, but all of our conservation programs, and spend time meeting with our conservation partners, like our Land Trust, Conservation District, U.S. Partners for Fish and Wildlife, to see are there administrative things we can do? Are there barriers that exist? Because we've been doing it the same way for the last 20 years that we could remove. And so we'll be establishing a report, bringing that forward to the board early next year. We've gotten some great feedback. We're already implementing the changes where we can, if they're just little administrative tweaks. And then the outcome of this work will be, larger policy decisions that you get to weigh in on. What we've also asked the consultants to do is map out 3 different conservation outcomes. So what you see on the map today is, that's what we've been able to achieve with our current tax levy rate. We're gonna have 3 scenarios where it's like, okay, what would we be able to do in the next 10 years as a county if we just kept that same tax levy rate? What would conservation look like if we were able to get a public vote to increase it, let's say by 50% versus increasing it to the full rate? Kind of using King County as a model. They went through a whole land conservation initiative project a few years back under Executive Constantine's leadership. But really, I think you all need a picture of what it looks like. The community needs a picture of what it could look like if we're able to collect more.
Can we stay on this for just a minute, Ashley?
Yeah.
So these pictures are highly representative of what the community is receiving in benefit for that 3 cents on $1,000. This is where the rubber meets the road, or not, as it were, in terms of conservation, where you're getting farmland preservation, you're getting agriculture, you're getting open space, trails, oak tree, riparian zones. This is a huge bang for the buck in terms of when the commissioners and the community is thinking about what does Thurston County look like into the future in terms of conservation. This is that tool. This is your tool as the board to implement that vision. So CPED, community planning and economic development, is about balance, right? So on one side of the house, it's helping to provide housing and building. On the other side of the house, it's working to preserve and conserve the land. It's where the board gets to decide what the vision for the community looks like. So looking at those pictures is really important in terms of when you're out in the community talking to your constituents, that this small amount of pennies goes to creating the vision that's in your comprehensive plan. So when you're looking at the comprehensive plan, that's the vision, right? This is the action.
And as Executive Constantine said over and over again, I think his key message for King County's Land Conservation Initiative is like, the time to buy is now. Before the land's converted, before it gets more expensive.
Please.
Thank you. I'm wondering, I know that we were in conversations with both the Port of Olympia as well as the City of Tumwater. Where are we in those conversations in terms of partnership for those areas?
Yeah, the county manager referenced that a bit earlier, and I think we have been working to be respectful in that partnership with those two entities, but I'll leave it to the county manager.
I think that the conversations have been revitalized as of late with a new perspective from the port on how the best approach was the county's recommendation a while back to take a certain approach, and it's been great to see that the port's now supporting that. But there's still some points of negotiation that have to take place with the landowner in order for that to like really materialize and come forward. And the City of Tumwater is in the lead on some of those communications.
It's a property located within the city, so it's. So.
Answer your question?
Yeah.
Here's just a quick timeline of that specific project that we have underway to look at our conservation program. So it did kick off last year. We've had some great meetings with our technical advisory group. We are really fortunate in this county to have amazing conservation partners that work collaboratively and show up. When you call them to a meeting, they'll show up and they'll put in the time to ensure that we've got the best program possible for this region. We're gonna have one more workshop with our technical advisory group this fall down at the Ag Business Park, hopefully. And then be able to bring back to you strategy and management framework suggestions next spring. This is just a link. I'll let you watch this on your own, but I wanted to be sure to highlight what King County's doing. It's always nice to know, like, there has been a path forged. And so that's just a short video that Executive Constantine and their Conservation Futures Initiative, which was successful. And with that, yeah, just happy to answer any additional questions. Very appreciative that I had Summer and Karen joining me at the table today.
Okay, keep them quick because we're probably
Way
behind.
behind.
Sorry, we can go through the next one fast.
do you
All
got,
these
Commissioner?
questions that commissioners asked. I'm wondering about the conservation features, the funding, the grant program, and where we are on that.
Great question. The next item on the work session agenda is for a past project, future projects. We are just putting the final touches on them, and we should be back before the board within a month or so. I think there were 2 projects that were up for consideration this year.
Recommendations from the.
Recommendations from the ranking committee, which is a committee made up of representatives from a number of different advisory groups across the county.
Okay.
Are people on the advisory groups allowed to apply for the funds?
No, we don't have land trust representation on the advisory groups. It's representatives from like the conservation district. Well, let's see here. The Ag Advisory Committee, like there's just a number of different committees that sort of feed into that. The historic.
That is a good question. We should research that in terms of allowed.
I know, yeah, that's been an issue in the past. I don't know if that was resolved or if that's something that's monitored or.
Let us research it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if any of the commissioners need additional information, we know this is, there's a lot of information here. Ashley, Josh, and I'm happy to meet with you to walk you through. I appreciate the staff doing this work. I think it's helpful in preparation, so we're not trying to have this complicated conversation in the midst of a budget conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Right.
Okay. So
Thank you so much, Summer and Karen.
In terms of grant awards, there was a grant award that the board made to the Nisqually Land Trust for a project called Elbow Creek. We took a closer look at our administrative procedures in CPED, and we just want to make sure we're crossing all the Ts and dotting all the Is, and are requesting that the board allow an extension of that award so that we could finish up the boundary line adjustment that they needed to apply for to fulfill their conditions.
The original action, it gave no authority for extensions. Probably was just an administrative oversight, so we didn't want to step over that by enacting an extension without it being in the spirit of what the board took action. So pretty straightforward items being requested here.
Any questions then on that? There's a proposed motion.
I move to authorize the County Manager and Director of Community Planning and Economic Development to approve an extension of the 2024 Elbow Lake Creek Conservation Futures Project through September 30th, 2025.
Second.
Discussion on that motion to extend this project. Call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. That's all we need on that.
That's all you need? That was
Let's
quick.
move on right on to your next item, which is item 3. Comprehensive plan review, natural resources.
CPED warning.
Yeah, it is. Oh, well, you're getting into the CPED season if you haven't gotten
CPED
the. We start showing up a lot more in this third and fourth quarters. Thank you for those just tuning in for this item and not the Conservation Futures item. Ashley Arai, Community Planning and Economic Development Director, joined by our Community Planning Manager, Derek A. This goes very nicely with the prior briefing that we just had on Conservation Futures, because today, in our fourth in a series of 7 briefings, we are going to provide an overview of our natural resources element of the comprehensive plan. So some of this was already touched on the land use chapter, but we'll dive a little bit deeper into what the county's obligations are under state law as it pertains to natural resources. You might think natural resources is environment, open space, things like that. To be clear, under state law, the natural resources element of our comp plan is really focused on the economic drivers for natural resources. So you're talking about your commercially viable ag land, your commercial forestry, mining, aquaculture, things of that nature. We will be coming back to talk about the more environmental pieces and open space pieces in a future briefing.
Any questions on that?
Okay, so some trends. We've been highlighting trends for each one of these. Probably comes as no surprise, climate impacts will increase and they are going to affect our natural resource industries. They are going to shift our crop and harvest seasons. They already are shifting those. Water availability and other elements, you know, when you think about forest land management under a changing climate. Development pressure could increase depending on the pathway and the timing to a 5% rural growth goal. It could be more or less pressure on our resource lands. And as you think about pressure, it's probably going to be more on our rural resource residential lands rather than the ones that are already zoned for long-term agriculture or forestry. And then this isn't just about land, especially as you're thinking about our natural resource industries. We wouldn't have them without the people. So we have also heard from a number of folks about the aging agricultural workforce, other regulatory and infrastructure constraints, especially as you think about markets being available for our ag and forestry products. And so the policies you'll see in this chapter go beyond just land use and zoning and things of that nature. They also speak to the partnerships and the efforts that we should be making to support these industries on other fronts. So just a quick review of state law. There are lots and lots of RCWs and WACs pertaining to our natural resource lands. Here are just a few highlights. We are required under state law to designate areas for long-term commercially significant agriculture, mineral lands, and forestry. So that doesn't mean every single farm in the county gets protected under our land, our long-term zoning, only those that are most commercially viable. We're on the hook for ensuring that these lands are conserved over the long term through our policies and development rules and compatibility with adjacent uses. We do have right to farm protections, right to forestry protections that are built into our codes. We're also encouraged to use other tools like the Conservation Futures tool we just talked about to help with conserving these lands. We also have our open space tax program. We have transfer and purchase of development rights. These are other conservation tools that exist in the toolbox. And then we, because we're CPED and we like to think about innovative ways that we might be able to support our natural resource industries. We are looking to implement or allow for innovative zoning techniques. And so one of the ones highlighted by the American Farmland Trust is the conservation subdivision. How do we, even as development is occurring, how do we allow for greater protection or conservation of ag and forestry lands? You can't have a CPED presentation without a map. So we've got our map up here. The first one really highlights where our mineral lands exist. So for those commissioners that are newer to the board, there was a very, very in-depth planning effort back in 2020 to update the mineral lands overlay to comply with state law. So you'll see the blue up there is our sand and gravel mineral lands overlay, and the orange is our bedrock. No updates are being proposed as part of this update to the comp plan, given it was recently updated. So this map highlights, in the lighter green, our long-term forestry, and then in the darker green, our long-term ag zoning. We've got about 15,500 acres in long-term ag, and you'll notice that the green dot up there in the Nisqually Valley, that same green area showed up on the Conservation Futures map. So the county did purchase the development rights in that area and establish conservation easements. So the ag land that exists there will exist in perpetuity. So here are some key things we've been hearing from the community as it pertains to our natural resources. It's always a popular topic. Our community is very supportive of our ag and forestry industries. The comment themes definitely centered around conserving ag, supporting long-term viability of our farms, forest lands, and trying to come up with innovative ways to support our agricultural operators. There was also a lot of interest in the wording and how we presented the aquaculture section of this chapter. And I don't know if you want to say more about all the updates that were made to that section.
Yeah, there were a lot of pieces that were updated to be kind of more in line with what the Shoreline Master Program says about aquaculture. And we got comments from both the aquaculture industry and some environmental advocates about some of the language and found ways to find a middle space for it.
But no real updates to policies. The board will be standing up the Water Resources Advisory Board. I think in the future, as we start implementing the Shoreline Master Program, that's where you would see policy updates come out as it pertains to aquaculture. And then, of course, a lot of comments supporting expansion of our conservation incentive programs. Things like conservation futures, open space, transfer development rights, and whatnot, knowing that those are really important tools in the toolbox to balance growth with conservation.
Do we have any side topic, but do we have any update from ecology on our S&P?
Don't.
It's still under review. I think we should be getting something in the nearish future. We were getting radio silence for a long time, and we've gotten some signs of life recently.
3 weeks. Everything's 3 weeks.
But that hasn't slowed us down. We had a grant to start developing communications materials, and we developed them with both the current benefits of Shoreline Master Programming in mind, as well as the future benefits of getting the new program in place. And so, yeah, we've been doing our best to make headway as ecology is going through their review process.
Yeah, I would expect to see something in between 1 and 7 3-week periods.
We're trying to match the proportionate delay that we have.
Yeah, we'll show you.
But no big concerns have come up, so that's the good news. They haven't highlighted anything, though, any heavy lifts. So how are we leading the way? Like, we've been asked to speak at conferences and whatnot for all of the great changes that the board has approved in the last few years around supporting ag viability. We've had improvements made to the development rules, updates to our conservation incentive programs. Some of the ones that are, most beneficial, like we had a record number of manure storage facilities built this year because of changes that were made to our rules around conservation practices on ag land. So big thank you from the Conservation District to the board for supporting that, and from our ag operators. All those little things add up to our farms being more viable in their long-term operations while being more environmentally protective.
So let's drill down on that in a positive way. So it's on a pad and a cover, so when it rains, the manure doesn't wash into the waterways.
So rather than it being in open areas, these are now covered. And there was just a tour a few weeks back with state agency partners coming and seeing all of these amazing conservation practices that have been implemented in Thurston County. And there is a map up in the hallway of all of those practices.
And that goes straight to improving water quality for our entire community.
How many?
Was it 5? I think 5 through VSP cost sharing just last year. I'll verify that, but yeah, it was and the challenge before was that they couldn't get through the permit process. So funds are only good for a certain amount of time. They disappear, and if you can't get through a permit process, and prior to the updates, every one of those permits would have required a reasonable use exception. So now they're, let's get conservation practices out on the ground. And then we also, on the forestry side, if you remember, we did receive a grant working with the City of Olympia. We partnered with them and University of Vermont to do a tree canopy analysis. The data from that analysis is feeding into the comprehensive plan update, so we have a much better idea of like, where is our forest canopy? Most counties don't have a rural canopy report. Urban areas drill down into this. It gets really complicated when you start applying it to rural areas, and you have to take into consideration things like commercial forestry and harvesting and things of that nature. But we're getting there, and the Planning Commission is taking a look at that data and making sure it's reflected in the comp plan, along with new goals and policies around what does forest protection look like in the future. So look at that, none right now. That doesn't mean that you won't have folks show up when we get to a public hearing for the board, or as the comprehensive plan makes its way out of the Planning Commission to the board. But for right now, we don't have any big policy considerations. I would say continuing to do the things that we're doing as it pertains to natural resources is what our recommendation or feedback would be. So we've got coming up, we've got August 20th, and that's when we'll present the Environment, Recreation, and Open Space along with our Historic Resources chapters. And then it looks like this is probably the last time we'll see this slide not being updated. The September 3rd briefing has been moved to August 27th. So that'll be when we're covering climate. Any questions? Did we get you back on schedule?
Thank you. Anything else for these guys on this item? All right.
Yeah, and there is the resource sheet, and we're always happy to provide additional info.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna plow forward into item 4, budget update, revenue options follow-up. No breaks.
All pedal, no brakes. All decisions to be made at 11:46.
if
Yes.
we introduce our newest member of our team.
Yes, sir. Who's going to do that? So, hello, commissioners. Thank you for having us today. Of course, you know I'm Summer Miller, Budget and Finance Manager, seated in your office. To the left of me is Jennifer Smith, the Budget Analyst, Tiff West, and we're missing Dolly. She's busy working on capital change requests currently, so she's upstairs. And our newest member is Karen Chen. She is joining us primarily in the capacity of ARPA, and a portion of her time will be spent working with our programs as well. So she joined us on Friday. Super excited to have her on board with us. We've been waiting quite a while. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself and maybe a little bit of your past professional?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Karen Chen. I've been living in Grace Harbor County and Thurston County for about 15 years. Before I took this position, I have 6 years experience as a CPA auditor, mainly focused on a nonprofit 501c3 type of organization. And after that, I moved on to a lot of social services nonprofit as a fiscal director for 2.5 years. Super excited to get into the county. Excited learning the different side of the grant. So yeah, happy to be here.
She's back on her 4th day, so we're excited about that.
Great addition to the team. You know, every member of our team shows a great deal of initiative and kind of this can-do spirit and attitude. And I would say that Karen has displayed that very early on. So we appreciate that because it's very busy and in some ways a little bit of challenging times for us. So it's very brave to start with us during this period of time. Okay, so thank you again for having us with you. This is our 5th update in this year, 2025. We had prior updates to the board in February, May, June, July, and today. In our July update, the board asked us to bring back a finalized revenue presentation and also provided direction to expand on some of these revenue options, such as gambling tax, pull tabs, punch boards, transportation benefit district options, cultural access program, sales tax options, a House Bill 2015, improving public safety, conservation rate, and some current expense general fund levy lift options. I'd like to remind the board that one of the key elements of budget and your team members here is that we are always refining our estimates. So some of the figures may look a little different from the last presentation because we don't deal in actuals. We're dealing we're dealing with actuals and a lot of guidance that we receive and reference past historical trends in the county to come up with the estimates that we see moving forward. Okay, so the first revenue option that we're going to look at today is the gambling tax, which is punch board and pull tabs. The county may impose a tax on gambling activities within unincorporated areas of the county. The maximum rate is dependent on the type. By charitable or nonprofit organizations, it's 10% of net receipts. By commercial stimulant operators, it's 5% of gross or 10% of net receipts. The revenue must be used for the purposes of public safety. This is a councilmanic option. Voter approval is not required. And the estimated annual revenue at last check was about $630,000 to $660,000. Some non-voter approved sales tax considerations for the board is that sales tax rate changes may only take place on January 1, April 1, or July 1 each year. It does not take effect until 75 days after the Department of Revenue receives notice of the change. The next revenue option that we have brought forward is a transportation benefit district sales tax. The board established the TBD for Thurston County under Ordinance 15103. The county may impose the TBD sales tax with an established transportation benefit district. The maximum duration of 10 years, unless it's used for debt repayment, then it may be renewed. Establishment of the Transportation Benefit District encompassing the jurisdictional boundaries provides an allowable 1/10% in sales tax.
It must be used for transportation projects. This is also a councilmanic option for you. Voter approval is not required, and we're estimating revenues currently between $830,000 to $1 million. These are annually. Again, your non-voter approved sales tax considerations are that they may take effect on January 1, April 1, July 1, and we need 75 days to provide DOR, notice of change. I also want to highlight here that we are working to gather some additional research to determine the jurisdictional boundaries that are needed. There is some language in the statute that requires the TBD for a 0.1% sales tax imposition be what we're receiving right now is the entirety of the jurisdictional boundaries. So we're sorting out whether that means excluding cities. The city of Olympia and the city of Tumwater currently have TBDs in effect.
So that figure doesn't account for them being excluded from?
It does not. This figure is based on what we would calculate for 0.1% for an equivalent tax measure in place currently.
We'd have to back them out of that number.
Okay, which, that's significant.
Could be, yes. There's some language in the ordinance and the statute and MRSC, and then we've received some guidance from, I believe it was the Department of Revenue, so I'm still sorting the specifics out currently. I do have a phone call scheduled this afternoon, and Travis and I have been working pretty closely on this one. Just so the board is aware, we want to be a little more conservative and careful as we move forward, because it's much easier to establish what jurisdictional boundaries are and the taxation that's allowed. It's harder to pull back taxes that are imposed and collected, right? So that would be a little more of a difficult thing to do. Does that make sense? Okay. So the other portion of the transportation benefit district is the vehicle license fee. The county may impose a non-voted vehicle license fee up to $50. There is a staged approach to that. It's paid solely by county residents who own vehicles. Exempt vehicles would be campers, farm vehicles, mopeds, off-road and non-highway vehicles, snowmobiles, and private use single axle trailers. Sorry, I have spreadsheets in my mind here. Revenues must be used for specific transportation projects, and we're estimating revenues currently between 1.8 million and 4.7 million. The Cultural Access Program, or CAP sales tax, is another revenue option that we're bringing forward. The county may impose a CAP sales tax to benefit or expand access to nonprofit cultural organizations. The primary purpose of the tax would be advancement and preservation of science or technology, visual or performing arts, zoology, which requires national accreditation, botany, anthropology, heritage, or natural history. Supplanting for this particular sales tax is not allowable. It is a councilmanic action. Voter approval is not required up to 0.1%. The estimated revenue at 0.1% is 7.5 million. We did back out Olympia's 2025 budget of 3.1 million, which would leave Thurston County's final estimated revenue at $4.4 million. Same considerations on when the tax rate changes may take place, the noticing to Department of Revenue. This is something that if we go with a higher level, I included this up to 0.3%, that we can place on the February or April special election, August primary or November general election, and it would require a simple majority vote, and it can be renewed in 1 or more 7-year periods. Where we are with this research currently is we have received feedback and information from our prosecuting attorney's office, the Department of Revenue, Department of Revenue's legal. The Department of Revenue is working currently with receiving information from the folks who put together the interpretive document for this particular sales tax. We've received feedback from MRSC, who has encouraged us to reach out to WASAC, as well as the Attorney General's office. So we have gotten some information back from Wasac. We're waiting on the PAO's office to finalize their communication with the Attorney General's office so that we can come back with the final decision.
Can you go back for a second? Sorry.
Yes, sir. Here or here?
Cap. Primary purpose is what I'm looking at.
The use is much more broad than that makes it sound, from what I've read, but
Can you staff the programs that are funded by this tax? All the
That I would have-
administration costs that would, I mean, because like if we did this, and now we've got 4.4 million, like that's a lot of staff to like get that money out or lift up the program or whatever, and if you can't use this money to do that, then we would have no ability to use the money.
So the latest publication, which was November 2024 for the revenue guide for Washington counties, states that the uses of revenues must be used in accordance with the statute 36-160-110, that the funds may be used for a number of purposes related to the cultural access programs, including the startup funding, administrative and program costs, capital expenditures, or acquisitions. So yes, the answer is you may.
That administrative cost is a pretty broad bucket. I mean, effectively, that can create additional support and programming for a parks department, to not only to take what we have and do additional type of services.
And to the county manager's statement, it would be additional services, not replacing the current funding in place.
So you've got the voter approved requires, so it can be renewed for 7 years. What's the limit? What's the time limit on the non-voter approved?
The non-voter approved still has a time period of 7 years. And, well, that's it. It has a time period of 7 consecutive years.
And then we can't renew it at that point.
you have
You-
to go out to the voters.
Then you go to the
And,
voters.
but there's a difference in the use of the money for the voter approved versus just the councilmanic one. There's some nuances in, like, there's broader use for, even broader use for if it's voter approved. But I see the councilmanic one as like a starting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bringing back the House Bill 2015, improving public safety. The county may impose 0.1% sales and use tax by June 30th of 2028. This does not expire if it's enacted prior to the 2028 deadline. Voter approval is required on or after July 1st of 2028. And the county must meet the requirement for local law enforcement grant, even if the grant is not applied for. And you must provide attestation of the met requirements to the Criminal Justice Training Commission. I did look again today at CJTC, and the grant information is still not posted. The NOFO and the application are still missing. I do have a pending request out to the consultant who is working on behalf of Wasac that I was put in contact with back in July to see where we are with that. The funding for this must be used for criminal justice, public safety, behavioral health, related staff, programs, and services. It was made very clear to me that supplanting is allowed, and the estimated revenue is currently at $7.5 million. The grant portion allows for 125, yes?
Can we go back to that lesson? So 7.5 million, what do we collect currently for public safety sales tax?
We are collecting currently between the two different funds, the anticipated amount, I believe, is right at $9 million.
Okay.
But didn't we pass a 2.2%?
It is a 0.2% tax, but there is revenue sharing between the cities and the county. There is no language in this particular measure that was passed that talks about revenue sharing.
Okay.
So the second part of this is the grant. It's $125,000 maximum funding for entry-level FTE salary and benefits. It's 75% grant funded by the state. It requires a 25% county match. It is for a 3-year period, which is diminishing as we speak, which expires on June 30th, 2028. The grant is administered by the CJTC, still pending release to their website. We must meet the requirements and attest as such to be eligible. There is a provision that allows for funding advancement for compliance of law enforcement agency training requirements. There is an annual reporting component due to WASAC each December, and the CJTC local law enforcement grant application pending. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. That's pretty much repeating some of the earlier bullets, my apologies. So it is still pending release, and it is sole purpose of law enforcement agency compliance with training requirements. I am unsure of the total amount of estimated funding because I don't know what the board would wish, if the board would wish to move forward with this, or the number of staffing FTEs across the different programs that we would need to look at. So we would further research this if this is a direction that you choose, and we would engage with the affected offices and departments. So the other revenue option that we have for you is a transportation benefit district, which is voter approved. The county may impose a transportation benefit district sales tax within the established transportation benefit district boundaries, maximum duration of 10 years unless it's used for debt repayment. The voter approval is required for up to 0.3%, must be used for transportation projects, and we're estimating revenues at just under $2.5 million to $3 million annually. Same level of tax considerations of when the tax may be started, 75 days after Department of Revenue notice, and this one can be placed on the February or April special election, the August primary, and or the November general election.
So, like when you were showing the tab version, you said that was gonna raise, it was a pretty wide range. Why such a wide range?
The wide range is due to $20 tab costs, and then you can increase to $40 and then increase to $50, and there's a staggered approach. So
You have to bump it up.
I believe it is a 24-month period between the bumps in the fee increases.
The window you have to affect can go up to 4.7, but it's a time frame. And then those will have direct costs to folks paying for them.
But it's councilmanic versus the 23 sales tax.
The vehicle license fee and the 0.1%.
I mean, I just reminding people of history. We did a survey, and I totally was thinking that, you know, you always hear about car tabs and being unpopular, and I assumed that the car tab one would be like slaughtered, but it was basically identical. People, according to the survey we did, people were indifferent between which. It was like slight majority favored, it was like 53% favored, and they were indifferent between car tab or a sales tax, which was interesting to me. I wouldn't have predicted that.
That is interesting, especially because the car tabs would directly affect those who register vehicles, and the sales tax would be imposed across.
You'd be capturing some people. Don't really think about that.
Yeah, you capture folks.
Mr. Fournier is always highlighting that, but people don't always think about that sales tax does capture some, you know, out of county
Out of area payers, right?
Okay, so we were asked to bring forward the revenue option of conservation areas, real estate excise tax, the rate. The county may impose an additional excise tax of up to 1% on all real estate and sales countywide, including the incorporated cities. Cities do not have this authority. The tax does not apply to county conservation area acquisitions. The tax is the responsibility of the buyer, not the seller, as in REIT 1 and 2. Revenues are restricted to acquisition and maintenance of the conservation areas, and estimated revenues at 0.25% and a full percent range between $3 million to $12 million. Again, we have the same voter approved sales tax considerations that they would be implemented on January 1, April 1, or July 1. We would need 75 days to notice Department of Revenue before the sales tax change takes effect. You can place this on any of the special primary or general election dates. It requires a simple majority. There's no minimum turnout requirements, no max rate, no length of time, and periodic reauthorization requirements.
The board had discussed 3 possible uses of this. One is, I'm just gonna say it because it connects to what we heard earlier, HCP, that reserve, like having a funding source for building up that reserve and making sure that we can keep the permitting fees the same, mitigation fees. Second would be parks M&O, which we desperately need. And third was ag. So when we're talking about our ag land preservation and purchasing conservation easements to farmers, compensating people for the zoning that would preserve ag land. An ag land a long-term land preservation program. Those were the things that the board talked about as this could fit if we wanted to ever ask voters about it.
So the revenue guide for the counties does state that the revenues are to be used exclusively for acquisition and maintenance of conservation areas, and conservation areas per the reference statute is defined as land and water that has environmental, agricultural, aesthetic, cultural, scientific, historic, scenic, or low-intensity recreational value for existing and future generations, and includes, but is not limited to, open spaces, wetlands, marshes, aquifer, recharge areas, shoreline areas, natural areas, and other lands and waters that are important to preserve flora and fauna. So pretty broad use there. Okay, so the last voter approved item, I believe, that we're bringing forward is the general fund levy lid lift. I would like to really extend a heartfelt thank you to JJ and the assessor's office. He's been incredible to work with since last year. Easily takes my questions and provides me answers when I need them. So the general fund levy lid lift, it's not a new tax. It increases existing current expense levy property tax above the 1% limitation. The board does have a choice of a single year lid lift, which exceeds the 1% annual lid for 1 year only. There's a multi-year lid lift, which exceeds the 1% annual lid lift for up to 6 years. There's unrestricted revenue into the current expense fund, which is our general fund. And if we were to look at our general fund levy lid lift options at a range of $1.28 to $1.80, which is your maximum rate of collection, the new property tax value would be $81 million, about $82 million to $115 million. Our current actual rate of collection with the levy shifts from the roads and with earmarks is at 82 cents per thousand. That nets us just under $53 million in property tax collection for this year. If we did the current rate without the earmarks, it's 79 cents per thousand rate of collection, which equates to $50 million. If we were to remove the road levy shift and the earmarks, just the road levy shift, it's 75 cents per thousand, and that's $48 million. It would be an increased rate of 53 cents to $1.05, and that's based on our current actual rate with the earmarks and the levy shift. And that would be an increase to property tax collections of just under $34 million to $67 million.
And if I could, Commissioners, this is something that the board would like to move forward with deeper conversations. Our assessor, Stephen Drew, has offered to come and do a presentation on some of the calculations for what the county could bring in. So just know that he's made himself super available, and he has had his team do some preliminary work as to what that would look like.
I get confused when we were talking about the single year and multi-year and like, so then what, like, can you walk me through, like, let's just take the single year. Okay, so we collect, we're not limited by the 1%. We set a new rate.
Sure.
We collect it, and then what happens the following year?
It would depend. So if you do a single year levy lid lift and you do a temporary lid lift, and let's say the board decides that you want to land on $1.28 per thousand. So in the next year, the single year of temporary collection, the lid lift is bypassed, if you will, and we're collecting $82 million. The second year after that, we revert back to our current rate of collection because it's a temporary lid lift. You're not resetting the lid permanently. If you do a single year permanent lid lift and you do it at $1.28, we would see that increase to $82 million in property tax collection, and moving forward, our $1.28 is our new highest lawful levied amount per thousand. And then if there is a reduction in the levy amount year over year, it starts at the $1.28, not the 82 cents per thousand.
So those are two different things you asked the voters about, a permanent versus a temporary?
It would be a board decision on how you want to essentially market it to the public, right? Do you want to do a single year temporary or permanent, or a multi-year temporary or permanent? And what are the benefits? And also, what are the drawbacks, right? There's something called a levy cliff.
Yeah, a single year would effectively would be a special assessment where you're going after the increase and then it goes back, and you're going to use that. It's kind of like a one-time dollar amount. If you would go out to the voters, you would go out with, as Summer said, either one or the other. It would be too confusing to try to do both at the same time and let them choose. You'd want to say one or the other. Our situation, in that we have a structural ongoing deficit, we don't necessarily require something where we may need an infusion of $30 million for 1 year. We could take that money, spend it, and then our operations are good. We're looking at the ongoing component of multi-year.
A lower amount, but ongoing.
Yes, yes.
So, and is like, when you say the range 128 to 180, like where does 128 come from? Like, can you go to lower than that? Can you go to $1.07 or something? Or
You absolutely can. So when we began this conversation some months back, the target that I was assigned was essentially midway between where we are currently and the max rate of collection, and then the max rate of collection.
But that's just an exercise.
Okay, that's just interesting.
Yeah, we're just doing it for the sake of, you can see the impact of numbers and the scale of the numbers. You know, if we're looking at the out years of what we need to continue to operate, you know, we've thrown the number 16 million around quite a bit. But as we look at, since we started talking about that number, the additional things that have hit our ongoing budget, some of the contract extensions and other ongoing operational impacts, that number in the out years gets bigger than just the 16 million.
You know, it's like, so let's take like $1.28. So we always talk about how like only like little less than 10%, 9.8 or whatever percent of your property tax dollar goes to the county general fund, right? The dollar bill, and so, okay, so am I to assume that people are paying, like, what are people actually paying, adding in the state and the schools and all that? I mean, they're really paying $14 or $15 per thousand or something as property tax, or?
I don't want to speak to that without running the numbers that I have in my mind through JJ or through the assessor's office, because that's really their area of specialty, and we would rely on them to provide that information. One thing I can say is that when you're looking at senior and junior taxing districts, the maximum rate of collection is $5.90 per thousand. And I did confirm with JJ yesterday that we're only sitting at about $3.40. So we're not near the ceiling of the maximum rate of collection.
That's the work the assessors offered to do, is to kind of go over some scenarios, what it would look like. I think that's, what is also helpful is to quantify it into like the medium house, and what that would mean for someone who's what they're currently paying and what they would pay. I saw some figures that our former assistant county manager, Robin Campbell, had done where I think it was using the $500,000. I don't know if that's still the median, it's probably a little bit lower than what it is, but they did some numbers that say they're paying this today.
Yeah, we did all that. We also had a campaign of misinformation during the courthouse initiative where the percentages were being used and people assumed that that's how much their total property tax bill was
It's gonna
going
go
up.
up.
Rather than, that's the percentage that the 9% is going up.
Yeah, the ad valorem is.
It got super confusing for people.
Yeah, it doesn't work like a straight percentage because it's a percentage of a percentage. And
Yeah.
that's why
So-
we'd want to break it down very simply to say, medium house, this is what you're paying today, this is what's being proposed. Whether it's taken and confused on purpose, that's another thing.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a comparison of your lid lift options, the single year versus the multi-year options. What that means, multi-year doesn't mean you're stuck with 6 years, it's anywhere up to 6 years. Temporary options talks about the levy amount increases up to 1% annually for the specified number of years, and after the measure expires, it reverts to the lid lift as if the lid lift never occurred. On a multi-year option, the lid lift lasts up to 6 years with annual limit factors specified by the county, and after the measure expires, the levy reverts as if the levy never occurred. On a permanent option, the 1-year levy is used to calculate all future levy 1% increases. On a multi-year option, the levy amount in the final year is used to calculate all future 1% levy increases. That's really important to note. If you choose to do a multi-year, 6-year permanent option, the first year of collection, let's just say is $1.28. We may have assessed valuations that are fluctuating over the 6-year period. The rate of collection may go up, may go down, and in year 6, we may be at $1.10 per thousand of assessed valuation collection. And that is the figure that will be used to calculate all your future year 1% levy caps.
That's a weird option, 6-year permanent. Because you like, why would you do that? You'd be like, you wouldn't know what would happen at the end of the 6 years.
Personally, I would say from past experience, that's the most ideal option, is to do a multi-year permanent lid lift. I think that when you're looking at temporary options or single-year options, you're doing that in essence to create information sharing opportunities with the public, and you're setting goals, obtainable goals, on what you do with the increase in the property tax as a show to the public that once you hit those goals, that you will come back for a lengthier permanent levy lid lift.
I mean, what's wrong with why wouldn't you do a 1-year permanent? That way you can decide what you want, you set it, it becomes the new thing. Like, what's the advantage of the 6-year permanent or 5-year or 4-year? Because after the first year, is it still only 1%? Like, what happens in those, like, let's say we do 6-year permanent. What's happening in those 2nd, 3rd, 4th years?
So if you go 1-year permanent, and you establish the new rate of collection,
Yeah.
that is your highest lawful levy amount. And then once that year expires, we're going to now maintain that amount moving forward. And that is the new baseline for the levy.
Don't you have to go back out to the voters?
You do.
Yeah, so
Well,
the issue is how much time, as someone was saying, how much time you have to calibrate another campaign before you have to go back out and get it reapproved. It's kind of like the EMS.
Oh, you have to go out twice?
It's not permanent until the voters can vote to extend it. It's kind of like the EMS levy. And I wanted to pick up on an important point Summer mentioned a couple of statements ago. The calculations and what we set it at is so important so that you don't shoot yourself in the foot based on the changing dynamic of the economy, that you actually could make less than you anticipated, which you did you know, you did the work of going out, getting voter support, but if you're not really working those numbers carefully, and that's why we would need a team to do that, it could hurt your out years projections based on our prices of houses going up, et cetera, prices of houses going down.
I think that's what happened with EMS too.
It is what happened with EMS, and we want to be careful not to repeat that dynamic. So that's where the board has mentioned, we got to keep the EMS levy in sight because we have to go back out to the voters and get it renewed. And so if you do
That's
that,
what year again?
that's, I believe it's not
We're in year 4 currently of the 6-year
2 years out.
levy lid lift.
So you would want to give yourself a window, if you're going to do the work to go out, you'd want to give yourself a long enough window where you can have the time to show the value of what you're providing for the new resources, whether it's to restore government services after a cut, and then also have the time to educate the community and have folks that are not government doing the campaign work for the community to get it supported again. Because absent it getting supported again, there could be a down step. That's why we don't want to have a competing, we don't want to compete with the EMS levy, be in the same time frame, doing both at the same time.
I'm still not really getting it. Like, it takes 2 votes. You have to have a vote to initiate a temporary, and then after the time period that 6 years, then you have to go to a vote to lock that in.
You want to go for a vote if you want to lift the lid again, right? Because we're limited to the 1% property tax cap annually. So if you do a 1-year permanent, maybe my example was poor. If you do a 1-year permanent, you reset the lid, that is now your new established highest lawful levy amount, and we're moving forward. If your property values just, for example, go up and the rate of collection goes down,
Yeah.
we're collecting less money. If we did the same on a permanent, multi-year, 6-year lid lift, we do have the option, there is a possibility that if the property values are, say, declining slightly, that the rate of collection will go up slightly. So we could essentially have a higher amount in year 6 than what we asked the voters for in the first year. It's just dependent on what's happening.
I think what the chair is asking is mechanics. I think we can research that a little bit and get back to him.
And it's really between the columns, temporary and permanent. That's where the question's lying. So in the temporary option, after the 6 years, it says after the measure expires, the levy reverts as if the lid never occurred.
Mm-hmm.
If we do a 6-year permanent, and that's something the voters would have to approve, the levy amount is final year is used to calculate all future 1% levy increases. So it's like the rate at which, the high water mark at which you set. But we can, let us go back and we'll I think this is
It's
where-
a very complicated thing, and I think this is where the assessors,
Gonna make it worse.
No, he'll help provide, because he has some really helpful, a spreadsheet that's really helpful to show in the out years, what the calculations will look like. We'll bring both scenarios forward.
it is very complicated, and it's hard sometimes to wrap
It's a
your brain
simple
around.
majority. It's a simple majority.
Yes, so if we go through the rest, it's for any, so the single-year option is for any lawful government purpose. Multi-year option is for any limited purpose stated in the ballot measure. There is no supplanting restrictions. The election dates for a single year is any special, primary, or general election. Multi-year options are for primary or general election only. And it requires a simple majority. Here are dates of consideration, and I'd like to thank the auditor's team in the elections office for vetting this information for me after I pulled it together. The November general election in 2024, the deadline to file a resolution for that election was Tuesday, August 5th. So we passed that deadline, and that would be for the November 4th election. If we wanted to go for the February special election, single-year levy lid lift, the deadline to file a resolution is December 12th of this year. That February special election is scheduled for February 10th of next year. The April special election is for a single-year levy lid lift. The last day to file the resolution is February 27th. That election is scheduled for April 28th. August primary election is for the multi-year levy lid lift, also a single-year levy lid lift. May 1st, 2026 is the last day to file a resolution for the August primary. The primary is scheduled currently for August 4th. The November general election in 2026 can be used for a single or multi-year levy lid lift, and that filing deadline is August the 4th, with the election scheduled for November the 3rd. This kind of simplifies all of the steps for any of these lid lift measures. It is not just filing a resolution adopted by the board. There are some other steps that are involved. You know, you'd need committees for, committees against. You need to have a strategy on how to move forward. So this would require a lot of strategic planning and also coming together and deciding what the rate is that you'd like to land at. And also, you know, if the measure fails, how do we pivot and move forward to put it forward to the voters again?
This is when you can do your advisory vote. You've been wanting to do one of those.
Bless you. Bless you.
You've been itching to do an advisory vote on something, Ty.
Charter.
Okay.
Do we have any, like, polling capabilities, or what, what do we have that where we could, like, go out and have a conversation with the public about this kind of thing?
I think you can entertain ideas like open houses. I think you can set up some online polls if you'd like. We can look into that. My past experience has been in open houses, just to get people in and to talk about what the need is, and to essentially have them fill out comment cards, you know, and where they'd like to see funding focused, what they'd be willing to pay additional taxes for, you know.
In the situation, sorry to interrupt, Summer.
No.
We're gonna be, the backdrop is cuts that we're gonna have to implement. So this is not a conversation about what new services. This is going to be.
Yeah. Asking people where they'd like to see us spend money is kind of pointless when we're trying to fill holes.
So the work we have to undertake is, as we pass the 26-27 budget, is here, because of inflation and increased costs, here's what the county has had to reduce. And then, you know, we look at what's that narrative going forward. Yes, you know, I don't, because I've asked before, do we have any polling data? I was told, when talking about the courthouse, no, we don't. But there are firms that do that. So how reliable it would be here in this county, I don't know.
MRSC does recommend that we look at other similar jurisdictions, you know, and if there have been any measures that have been put before the voters and what the success rate has been and not. And then also to keep in mind any competing measures on any of the upcoming ballots, you know, that we might be considering. So there's a lot there, but we are happy to pull together any additional information that you might need and also research any polling options that might be available to us. So this is it's pulling together the estimated revenues of the council manic approvals and the voter approved measures here. All of the items on this particular slide are restricted in one way or another. Punch board and pull tabs were restricted to public safety, transportation benefit district sales tax, and vehicle license fees. On both sections are limited to transportation projects. The cultural access program sales tax has some limitations as well that we discussed. House Bill 2015, improving public safety, is limited to public safety and mental health programs and the like. And
Sorry.
No, go ahead. And conservation area rate is, you know, limited to conservation efforts.
Yeah, I think the word restricted is important. While there could be some opportunities to use some of this funding to backfill some general fund, by and large, we don't want folks to look at that number and think, oh, well, that's the solution. It's an easy dollar for dollar switch out, because it would not be. And in some ways, some of these revenue sources would require us to initiate new types of service or programming, which would increase the overhead in other areas, which would increase the general fund support. So those are options, but it doesn't necessarily address the foundational issue we have.
She said 2015 permits supplanting.
Yes, that.
There's also new needs that we need to address, like the public defender costs and.
So in that context with supplanting, there's the threshold we have of the number that we have to provide to the sheriff to not.
Maintenance of effort.
Maintenance of effort, not to supplant the other funding, so there could be a little bit of wiggle room. Because remember, we established that at the 2023 level?
We did, yes.
Yeah, 2023.
2023 level, and it's grown a couple of million since, but it hasn't grown to the amount. We couldn't just take the 7 million, plop it in, and switch it out.
There's other things that could be applied to besides public safety sales tax items.
Correct, like public
Court-related.
defender, yeah.
Yeah.
And that would be, we have a presentation coming next week. That would be an area of consideration because of the significant increase to operations public defender caseloads are going to create.
So that's what I would be interested in looking at. I'd like to see us go forward in exploring the 2015 sales tax, but specifically for covering those operational costs.
Sure. And then the last slide, we just have the unrestricted.
It's like I'm chomping at. Thank you. Okay, and then the next one is just asking for board direction.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
So I guess I'll be very kind of blunt about it. First, thank you so much for gathering all of this information. And I know a lot of these took a lot of research. I guess I'm looking towards the board because just based on where we are right now, and based on, thank you, Commissioner Fournier, for reminding us of our goals. I think that was one of our goals, is that budget stabilization piece is, I think that we have to go to the voters for a general fund levy lift. And we can try to piece it together with other councilmatic options, but that really is not going to address the foundation as the county manager has stated. And so I think that where we are right now and where we're going to in the future, I think the levy lift is something I would like to continue to discuss and to kind of have conversations with staff, but I also think it's very important to have a meeting with all of our elected officials about this and have a meeting with all of them, and I think that would be a great way for the assessor to present the information to all the electeds about because I think they'll have a voice in this discussion too. I wanted to look at the other councilmatic options and, because I was kind of leaning towards, okay, how can we patch things up? But the more I've thought about it and the more we're looking towards the future and just really stabilizing our budget and providing that safety for our staff at the county and the services that we provide to the public, I think that the only real way to do that moving forward is with a general fund levy lift. And so I would like us to give direction to, to provide that direction to pursue that. And not to say, right, there is that option. There's a lot of decision points, right? We have to decide the timeline of when we're gonna do it. We have to decide if it's gonna be single or multi-year. There's still a lot of decision points that the board has to make. And so I would like to start having those conversations and having those options be brought forward. But I think that it's also very important that we have a conversation with all of our elected officials. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I don't think we can do just one thing. Right? There's, we have to do some things that we know we can, we can be successful on. So I think we have to take some councilmanic authority and put some things across the board. And, they're not, none of them are, there is no magic wand in any of this, but I feel like we have to move forward with conversations about HB 2015. The punch board pull tabs one is small, it's a small win, but it gets us a little something to help. And it has restrictions, but it has restrictions to be able to put money where we need things. I want to move forward talking about the cultural access program sales tax, especially, but, I'm not saying as a tomorrow option. I'd like to see us bring our economic development program manager on board and task that staff member with building a plan, because, the research that I have done, it says that every dollar you invest in this type of program, you see $8 in return. And so, this is goal number 3, economic and cultural asset development. This is a long-term return in investing in economic development, but it doesn't fix things right now, but I don't want to overlook it. And then, I'd be interested in continuing discussion about the levy lid lift. I'm skeptical that the voters would have an appetite for that kind of thing, but I don't want to stand in the way of it. I think that, that is the only real way that we have to try to fix our structural deficit. But it's also not guaranteed. It's not, not as immediate. So, it's not a magic wand immediately either, but I think we have to explore it.
I can add, we're here because we're looking at how do we right-size 26, 27. We will be in the next couple of weeks sending departments the targets to reduce down for a balanced budget. That's going to be a significant amount of cuts when we look to the impact. We're looking at direction from the board, because if any of this funding offsets that, we will factor that in. And obviously with the levy lid lift, there's no certainty. It's just a matter of, because of the timelines, does the board want us to get working on that leading up to the budget adoption process that you will all have to take?
But we can't take that into, if just saying we're going to put that on a ballot, we can't take that into consideration when we make our budget.
No, I'm not speaking about, you're correct. I'm not speaking about the levy lid lift. That's direction to get it. If you want us to do that, we have to get it working. It's the other revenue dynamic that would be great to understand where the board is at on some of those sources so that we can figure out.
On the councilmanic.
Yes, so we can figure out.
I'm for moving those 3 things forward.
Thank you. I don't think that it's realistic for us to pass anything councilmatically and then turn around and ask the voters for a general levy lid lift. I think if we want to be really serious and we're going to move forward with something, I think we just have to focus on one thing, and doesn't mean that we can't plan for, if it fails, like having some options on how we can make up ground. But I think that this year, we just, if we're really serious about passing a lid lift, I think we just have to stick to that and see what is the best way to have that outreach to the voters and kind of let them know the situation that we're in. But I think passing things councilmatically and then turning around, it's just we're gonna be shooting ourselves in the foot even before we get out.
Bird in the hand's worth more than 2 in the bush.
I don't.
Then you end up with, I don't know, putting all our eggs in one basket, I think, is dangerous.
Okay, where does that leave us?
We're looking for direction.
What kind of direction are you looking for?
Which revenue sources do we queue up for decision-making?
I think we've heard two different options, some councilmatic options and then just the general.
Well, we know we've got
From levy
needs in
rental.
public safety with the courts, and there's an option right there that we know we can realize to help, with things like public defense. We know we're gonna have to pay the piper. We know we don't have money for it right now. There's an option.
I mean, I'm really interested in 2015 for, A, it's a pretty significant amount of money. B, it's directly related, our hand has been forced by, there were things we couldn't do with the public safety sales tax that are gonna have ripple effects, and now we've got public defender caseload standards. Like, it's almost like the filling in what voters already approved, and I feel like I could look the public in the eye and explain that. And it is something that we can make happen to meet a really core need. I'm not against teeing up, because obviously what Commissioner Mejia said, like, it's gonna be a process, like, we're gonna have to I think we do need to have that conversation with electeds, but I do think that everyone's gonna need to see what happens this fall, with this budget. And it would take that long anyway, but, but I think having that conversation like next week versus having it like in November or December or January will be a very different conversation and probably much more productive. We will probably have some motivated elected officials to say, we have to do something, we have to step up and explain to the public. So I see that as not a long-term project, but more of a medium-term project. It's not gonna help us this year, no matter what we did. And I think to jump the gun on it might be a little counterproductive. I'm sensitive to what Commissioner Mejia says about the, is it hurting our chances to make the case to the public if we take a councilmanic action? I think you're right, but I also think Commissioner Fournier is right when he says, a bird in the hand or two in the bush, so to speak, and because of this new tool that's been provided in the wake of these competing expenses, I'm interested in those two, I guess, and not that I'm ready to cast a vote right now, but I think we should tee up details on the 2015 option, and we should start the longer-term conversation needed for a levy lift. And maybe we decide not to go do one or not to do both, but those are the two things that I think will have a significant enough positive impact that we should be looking at moving those two things forward.
I'm okay with that, and I just kind of want to provide a reminder for the sales tax that it wouldn't really take place until January 1st, just because of how, so we wouldn't be seeing that funding come in immediately after January 1st. It takes usually like 6 months for funding to start, for us to start seeing the funding from Department of Revenue.
I read 75 days, but there might be some other steps that they have that I'm not aware of, so we can sort that out.
Just wanted just wanted to kind of, for that to also be on the back of a commissioner's head for anything councilmatically.
It's not immediate.
There's no
Commissioner Klaus, we lost Commissioner Grant for another obligation she had. Commissioner Klaus, did you have anything? I know you're not feeling well, but certainly want to explore.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I like the way this conversation is headed. I'm also interested in looking into HB 2015 as well as the lid lift. I'm curious to know I guess one question I have for the board in regards to the levy lid lift question is, what timeline are my seatmates interested in pursuing? Like, which election would you like to see this on if it is something that we ultimately end up choosing to move forward with?
To be determined.
Hard to say. I mean, August of next year, I don't know. I mean, I can't, it's hard for me to imagine this getting teed up before next August.
That's part of the conversation that I also wanted to have with all the electeds, right? It's like, and hear their thoughts on kind of what they would think, right, as well. That's kind of what I was thinking. That's why I'm like, I think having that meeting, because there's so many decision points. So I don't have a timeline in my head, Commissioner Klaus.
Okay. No worries. Thank you. That was just one thing I was curious about. And I also was kind of wondering what the next steps would be. I know we would want to engage the other elected officials. I think that's a really good idea. As far as our staff, would we, because I mean, I've never obviously been through a levy lid lift discussion since I've been elected. So I'm just curious what the process would look like. Would staff come forward with a proposed plan for public engagement or a timeline? So I'm just kind of curious what the key like planning and decision making milestones would be from staff.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, for that question. We would come back, what we're looking for is the direction today. We can come back to the board. There'd be multiple conversations. I do agree that sitting with all the electeds would be a good step, even prior to having all of that mapped out and taking the assessor up on his offer to come and show some of the numbers and what it would look like. But yeah, there are multiple steps and things that the county can do and things that we would need others to do from an advocacy standpoint. And then there's the election component as well, that we'd work with the auditor and the team on what that looks like. So if a board will if board were to give direction to explore this, and we can come back with a overview and a plan of what it would all look like.
Okay, thank you. For me, as we continue having these discussions, if this is what the board ends up giving direction to do, I would really like to know about what a comprehensive outreach plan would look like to make sure that we're getting public input and coming up with creative ways to ensure that everyone's had the opportunity to engage with that process.
Sure, I know there's limitations from what government workers can do.
Yeah, I was like thinking because of the campaign piece of
We
that,
can do
yeah.
some information pieces, but then there will be a need for there to be a citizen-led committee that then can do the advocacy and outreach. But we can lay that out too, and maybe bring some best practices from some of our neighboring jurisdictions that have done something just as an education component. Because I hear what you're asking about not having done this before, so we can try to fill in the gaps for you.
Thank you. That would be great. That's exactly what I was going to ask for, is examples of neighboring jurisdictions that have done this already. So sounds like we're on the right track. That's kind of where I'm at with everything.
Or we can just get the example from EMS.
Sure.
Yeah, because they've done it.
And they were successful.
Yeah, so.
And then we can also do more research on the question you asked, Commissioner Menser, about how does that temporary and permanent, and we'll give an example of.
Yeah, I mean, that can be.
Yeah, we'll flush that out as well.
You know, we've got time.
Yeah.
For answer those questions, but yeah, I still a little confused about the mechanics of how you go through. What's the voter going to see? You know, being asked this, and this is going to happen. And okay, well, it sounds like we have some consensus on those two items being moved forward for further.
Yeah. So just to recap, we're looking at exploring the general fund levy lid lift process. It's not direction to do it, it's simply to explore. As part of that exploration, to bring elected officials, and I would also probably invite the appointed directors to that meeting, because I know that they would want to be aware. I understand the elected officials at the table, but just be aware of the conversation. And then for us to start to look at what is the process to tee up the 2015 sales tax component.
Okay, let's move on to our last item. We have the trail funding request. I previously talked about this, asking if there was climate mitigation project funds that might fit. County Manager, do you want to say anything about it?
Thank you so much, and I appreciate Summer's work with the budget team, and extension also Rebecca, who's still on leave, but we will be with us hopefully shortly. There is some additional funding that we could use for this request. We think it falls within the stated purpose. We know that the Ralph Monroe Trail is something that brings a lot of community value and benefit, and the county has participated in the past. Also want to give special thanks to Public Works and our Assistant County Manager for working with Public Works to identify, I think it was some of the mowing components that they could do in kind. So we feel comfortable if the board would make a motion, but to recommend the not to exceed 11,280, which was the request for potential supplies and other things that would be needed to do this enhancement.
Any questions from the board?
Move to authorize the county manager to expend climate mitigation funds for the Ralph Monroe Memorial Project for an amount not to exceed $11,280.
Motion is second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. In favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries, and that's the end of the agenda. Thanks for staying extra. We're back at 1:30 for commissioner check-in, but we're adjourned.